Big week ahead, week 15 of the fantasy football season. It's Walid. I'm here with Brian for the Occupy Fantasy podcast. What's going on, man?
What's up, bro? How you doing? Feeling some pressure this week, or are you relaxed?
I am. No, man. Waivers have cleared now. So at this point, I'm relaxed. I will be until Sunday because fortunately, I have no one going tomorrow.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing, honestly. In this a million
Mhm.
point spread, Ravens and Jets. But I guess if you're not facing Lamar, are you?
I'm not, thank God.
Okay, good, because that would be quite the sweat. So
Yeah.
yeah, big week ahead though.
For sure, man. Most of you guys are either in a middle of a playoff matchup or kickstarting the next round or just starting it. So that's kind of been the theme the last few weeks is we've tried to gear you up, but now it's crunch time and time to get it going.
Hell yeah! It's the hardest part is making the playoffs. A lot of it now is up to the fantasy gods. We can only do what we can to get in the right spot. So we'll walk you through this episode with some guys you could probably pick up still, and then some streaming options because it doesn't matter who got you here. It's about who can get you the
Period.
championship. So
Period.
talk
Don't
about
rest on your laurels. Don't live in the past. You might have to bench someone that has done right by you all year.
yep.
You might have to start someone that's been giving you headaches all year.
Exactly. And we know you have questions too. So thanks to tweeting at us or sending us messages. We got your questions and we will answer them at the end of the show for your start sit waiver for your playoff matchups.
Perfect. Well, let's start there. Let's start with waivers and guys that you can add this week that potentially could impact your playoff matchup.
Yeah, this first guy you and I have been talking about for about a week and a half now, and that's DeAndre Washington out in Oakland. You're very invested in the situation, so I'll let you talk about it.
Well, some bad news broke today as Jacob's MRI. Well, good news. Sorry. Fuck. What am I talking about? His shoulder is okay. But if you had DeAndre Washington, the bad news is it does look like Josh Jacobs should play, barring any setbacks. Am I right?
It sounds like it. I'm still not 100% convinced just because a lot of the medical professionals that I were reading last week, because it was last Tuesday, Jacobs came out and said he had a fractured shoulder. And
Mm-hmm.
what a lot of people who follow injuries say is that when a player announces a specific injury like that, either it just happened, which we don't think is the case with Jacobs, or they're at the end of their rope and they can't really play anymore. And they're like, I've been dealing with this injury, and then they get shut down. And then Jacobs doesn't play, and then once he didn't play on Sunday, I was like, oh, they're probably going to shut him down for the season. Then they add running back Rod Smith on Monday or
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday. I said, well, damn, he must be done. But then we get this news today that MRI is clear. He's probably good to go. So I don't know if we're out of the woods yet, but it does seem like he's going to return. But if he doesn't, or if we get word, or if you have an open spot, DeAndre Washington's a good guy to stash.
Right, juicy matchup against the Jaguars, who have been abysmal against the run. Definitely worth stashing. You never know. He's just a guy that really, really, really wants to play. And if it's a pain tolerance issue, I think he's going to play. But you never know. And maybe the Raiders are smart for a change and, don't throw their first round pick in a pointless matchup.
We'll see. I keep thinking that the Panthers are going to shut down McCaffrey here soon, and they keep running them out there with 3 minutes left to go, down 21 points. So we'll see we'll see. I don't know if Oakland's going to do it either.
Moving on, there's a couple of other running backs, I think, especially if you're in, let's say, PPR or half point PPR leagues, that you might need to take some flyers on.
Well, your boy Chris Thompson is back after a pretty lengthy absence with his toe, and now with Darius Geis going to injured reserve, Chris Thompson should play more and more. He had 8 targets last week and was a nice little safety blanket for Dwayne Haskins. And then, pretty much out of nowhere, Boston Scott, with Miles Sanders there and the signing of Jay Ajayi, Boston Scott was pretty much an afterthought, except for that one game in New England when he was the only other running back on the roster. And then on Monday night, Sanders starts cramping. Scott comes in, completely sparks the offense. Got 16 opportunities. I think Sanders returned, and Scott was
Yeah,
still taking work. So I'm not really sure how to read that situation.
for sure. I mean, the Eagles' offense has been depleted like no other. I think they only have two wide receivers on the team right now. The slack's got to be picked up from somewhere. And I mean, as long as Jordan Howard's not in the lineup, Boston Scott has made a case to get at least some work. Now, I like Chris Thompson a little more with Geis out, given just the game scripts you expect. The
Right.
Skins to be down a lot, and Thompson to be kind of the safety blanket there. But it's one of these things. If you're looking at either of these guys right now, you're obviously in a tough spot. But that's not to say that they can't make a difference. So don't go out of your way. But let's say you are dealing with a just beat up backfield and you need someone to spark it up. I think Chris Thompson's a flyer worth considering.
Yeah, definitely. And all these guys are even guys you can stash at the end of your bench because at this point, if you're not starting a player, you should probably be cutting them. But these guys you can stash just maybe something happens and this week they go out and get a ton of work and they have a more favorable outlook in week 16.
For sure. And I mean, the commodity Patrick Laird, we have to throw him out one more time. If he's still sitting there, I think at this point, his opportunities, his volume in this Miami offense is worth starting consideration.
Yeah, both Laird and all the other guys we've mentioned, last week and the week before, if they're still out there, definitely go pick them up. And we've named a few running backs. Lead any receivers that are out there that you like?
Sheesh. So obviously last week was a devastating week for receiver injuries. Mike Evans going down with a season-ending hamstring injury. DJ Chark, high ankle sprain. It doesn't look likely that he's going to trot out there on Sunday. And I mean, Calvin Ridley, another guy, right? So slack to be picked up. And when I look at these teams and who they pick up, who should get the slack, I can't say there's anyone that gets me really excited, man. I mean, you got Rashad Perriman and Justin Watson. I prefer Perriman given, I guess, his and Winston's rapport throughout the season. He
True.
has been the more experienced guy. But I mean, Chris Conley, this Jaguars offense has looked really bad. And I mean, Christian Blake, I guess he gets a boost. But at that point, once again, I don't know if any of these guys are immediately getting me excited. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and maybe you're right. Maybe all of these guys are more DFS plays than they are season-long plays. I actually like all of these guys. I like Blake the least because Dan Quinn said that he wouldn't get the full role. That he'd be splitting with Zacharias and Russell Gage too. So I don't know. Conley I like a lot. He's been getting a ton of opportunity, and we'll talk about him in the DFS episode. And then Perriman and Watson, we know that Tampa Bay is going to throw the ball a ton. I mean, Watson got 8 targets last week after Evans left in the first half. So, if you're an underdog, one of these guys can make a ton of sense to have high upside that could potentially lead you to an upset.
For sure. Let me ask you one quick question. I'm not considering either of these guys given how the Steelers' passing offense has not had much to show for. But Deontay Johnson or James Washington, if you needed one guy for the next 2 weeks here, who do you want?
I know a lot of people are talking about Deontay Johnson after last week, and I understand that. I get that. But it looks like Juju's actually going to be back this week. He practiced today in full, and he was all over social media saying he's going to try to be back Sunday, which I think is a pretty good indication. So I'm not sure if we can trust any of those guys in a low-volume offense with Juju back.
Moving on to tight end, a position that I've been sweating now for the last few weeks with Evan Ingram out. And I was able to pick up Higbee again. So I think he's the guy that I'm going to be rolling with, assuming Gerald Everett is out yet again. But for those that weren't as lucky, let's say even like potentially Mark Andrews out Thursday, or you just simply, you've been streaming all year. You maybe Jared Cook has burned you with his concussion, but you need some magic at the spot. Where are you looking?
It's really tough. If Andrews is out, I think Hayden Hurst makes a ton of sense. We saw him catch the long touchdown last week, and both he and Nick Boyle will see a boost. They play lots of tight ends anyways. So, and actually, our listener questions at the end, our follower questions at the end, 2 different folks had questions about Mark Andrews. One from OVO Jake saying Mark Andrews or Tyler Higbee, who you pointed out, and then Nick, Andrews or Jack Doyle. And I guess my question to you, Lee, is if Andrews plays, you have to play him over those two guys, right?
Yeah, I think so. If he plays, I don't see him necessarily being limited. The Ravens were pretty optimistic after Sunday's game, but given the short week, given the matchup, and just what Mark Andrews means to this team, it wouldn't surprise me if they held him out. But if he plays, I think it's with certainty that they feel comfortable putting him out there in a pretty like overwhelming game. So. I think so. Andrews has done well by you. I mean, you could make the case for Jack Doyle just given the spike that he's seen, but yeah, it's hard to benchmark Andrews if you've had him.
Yeah, I agree. So for both of you or anyone out there listening who has that dilemma with Andrews or someone else, just check inactives on Thursday night, and if Andrews is active, I think that's the guy you got to go with.
So I know we were sweating David Njoku kind of last week in his return. At least I was, given his matchup this week. But he logged about 30% of snaps. I mean, my question here is, can you trust him? Do you expect his volume to go up? Maybe they were just easing him back in, and maybe this week he gets 60, 70% of the snaps.
Yeah, it wasn't very encouraging, was it, to see 30%? And it's kind of hard to take that leap of faith in Week 15. I know the matchup's pristine, but unless we get some word this week from beat reporters or Njoku himself or the coaching staff that he's going to play a lot more, I'm not sure you can start him.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely am. Like I said, I lucked out and picked up Higbee. But I mean, who knows? Maybe Everett comes back and I'm back to considering,
Right.
Njoku. But like that 30% snap count was way more disappointing than the fact that he only had one catch. So unless like you said, unless we hear from beat reporters that was just a matter of getting him up to speed and easing him back into things, very, very hard to trust him.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we talked about picking him up a couple weeks ago, but just hold through. We don't have to make a decision just yet. It's Wednesday. We'll see if we find out anything throughout the weekend.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about some streaming options at QB.
All right. Now, here's the position where you can take a leap of faith because, as you talked about a couple weeks ago, we have potentially Ryan Fitzpatrick against the Giants. It looks like Eli in that same matchup against the Dolphins. We could also go with Gardner Minshew, I think, against Oakland. And a question to you, I guess, because one of our followers, Chris, asked if Tannehill is a must start. He was randomly sitting on the waiver wire. So I guess if Tannehill is out there, I guess he counts as a streaming option this week too, given the fact that he's been like a top 5 quarterback.
Right. Yeah, I'd be surprised given how most fantasy players, they kind of work retroactively. They see, oh, he's been doing really well for the last 3 weeks. Instant pickup. But yeah, I think he's a pretty consistent starter at this point. If you pick them up, even though he is going to be due for a regression now, should the Titans invest their future in him, that's a different conversation. But I think he is a serviceable starter. Two other guys I'll throw out there that could very well just be sitting there ready to be acquired, Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, you have that dilemma yourself, right, between those two guys.
Right now. And I have Jimmy G. While he's on the waivers, I have Baker plugged in right now. And it's funny because they both they're similar and different in ways. They're similar because both guys are hit or miss. Like if you've looked at their starts, they've laid eggs, but they've delivered some good performances. They're like the opposite of that consistent, like, oh, I'll plug him in and take my 17, 18 points.
Right.
And not with these two guys.
No.
So, but really, really good matchup. I'm lean, and I have Fitzpatrick on my bench, who I actually haven't considered starting this week. And maybe you can convince me otherwise. I have my eyes, knock on wood, set for him week 16, but you can make a case for him too. So I'm overwhelmed right now. I have Baker, and I think I'm going to end up starting him, but I could be swayed for sure.
Yeah, I know you and I talked about this morning before the show, but I'm kind of leaning towards Jimmy G now, just looking at their team total, looking at some DFS stuff. I mean, they have one of the highest team totals on the week. I mean, he's in a good spot against Atlanta coming across the country, too. So I right now, I think I'd lead Jimmy G between the two.
Yeah, I think you can make a very strong case, and Jimmy G has had way more blow-up games than Baker, and he's also trending in the right direction, right? He's had some of these better games as of late. Baker and the Browns, they're going to be still traveling to Arizona, whereas the Niners are at home. And then just kind of for what it's worth, I know we usually don't look too much at the qualitative things, but they're real. Like the Browns have issues right now.
Yeah.
Who knows if Odell wants to be there, like, where their focus is right now versus the Niners are a team that's clicking and like firing away on all cylinders.
That's true too, and that can always be something that breaks ties, right? Like between the two, they're headed in completely different directions, and you just feel more confident in Jimmy G's environment around him. So yeah, I get that too.
Environment's definitely the big thing here, and as far as the implied total, it bodes well for the Niners. The only thing is the Niners are projected to be in a, let's say, less pass happy type of game, given that they are 11-point favorites.
Yeah, I think up to 12.5 now. Yeah,
12.5. So, and the Niners are a very effective team at running the ball. So if they get that lead in the first half, Jimmy G could very well go, 17 of 22 for like 180 yards, and that's the game. So, but Fitzpatrick, Eli, can you make a case for either of those guys over what I'm looking at?
no, I would start either one of those guys. I think. Yeah, I think just higher floor and ceiling for both of those two if you have that option.
Let's talk defenses.
Yeah, in one of my leagues, I actually stashed Kansas City, but now I'm a little hesitant given how Drew Lock has looked. Yeah. So I still, I know Lock has been impressive, but I think you look at this game where Kansas City is 10.5-point home favorites. It's going to be super cold, like 11 degrees or something crazy. So I really like Kansas City's defense there in a temperature weather environment that should be low scoring. Other teams I think you should consider, obviously, Eagles against the Skins. Bears. The Bears are playing the Packers, and I think it's in Lambeau, and that's another game. The temperature is going to be super, super low.
It's going to be cold. We know how the Bears kind of fared the first time these two teams played, and then not to mention just the familiarity, right, for a defense going against a division quarterback for the second time in that season. There's that angle too. So I'm rolling with the Packers. I think the Chiefs are an interesting option. Yeah, you could make a lot of cases for a handful of teams that could be sitting there. Eagles being one of them, the Seahawks. I'd even throw out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have been as bad as they've been against the pass. They do get to the quarterback, and they've had some solid games. Now, they've had games where they've given up 30 plus points, but have scored like 2 touchdowns to save performances. But this matchup is pretty solid against the Lions.
Man, it's about knowing your scoring system too. If your scoring system, you lose points for tons of yards or tons of points allowed, then yeah, maybe Tampa Bay is a little further down your preference list.
Totally, exactly. If it's one where that doesn't factor into, then it puts more weights on things like interceptions and turnovers. So they could be an interesting option. I mean, defenses this time of year, hopefully you've set yourself up to where you have someone that you don't have to that you've planned to stream in a good matchup. But if not, I think you could pick up maybe the Browns against the Cardinals. You could argue for the Seahawks against the Panthers. The Packers could be sitting there. So there's a lot to work with, and hopefully you planned ahead.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any one slam dunk option this week that was probably picked up ahead of time. So I think, like you said, there will be some options to work with on the waiver wire.
Let's run through some of these questions and hope we can add some playoff value, man. Right now, we are about to tilt the playoff landscape for some leagues because people are going to listen to us.
Hopefully.
Take that responsibility serious, Brian.
I am. 100% seriousness from me. Hope you do the same.
Let's do it. So very, very deep dynasty league from our boy Bismo at the Bismo Funyun. 30-player rosters. Kudos, man. I love hearing about leagues that are deep. Half-point PPR. You have to fill 2 running backs and 2 flexes from the following players. So listen up carefully.
Okay.
You got Taylor Gabriel. You got J.D. McKissick. You got Ty Johnson. You got Tevin Coleman. You got Olamide Zacchaeus. You got Rashad Perryman, Scotty Miller, and Caden Smith. Oof. Deep league.
We're talking real deep here. So for me, at least Rashad Perriman.
Yeah.
I think you still have to go Tevin Coleman, especially
Yep.
a little revenge game narrative. So that's 2.
Game script should look good for that too.
Right. We need one more running back from this group. So Christ, I guess I'll go probably J.D. McKissick. He's been getting the most work of the Lions between him and Ty Johnson.
Yeah.
And then if Gabriel plays, you have to go him, even though it's a pretty shitty game environment. If not, give me Zacchaeus from Atlanta. He's going to get some more run. He had the long touchdown last week. Maybe builds momentum on that.
There you go.
So, Bismo, good luck with that.
Yeah, man.
All right, we got 2 questions from Johnny Martinez. So we'll go first one for you, Walid. Golden Tate or John Brown in PPR?
I'm going to go with Golden Tate, especially considering it's PPR. John Brown faces a Steelers defense that's been pretty damn good. And last I checked, Josh Allen's still not that accurate down the field. So
Nope.
It checks out.
All right, Tate it is for you, Johnny. And Johnny has one more question. Between these 3 running backs, rank them in your favorite order this week. Patrick Laird, Devin Singletary, or Miles Sanders?
So I'm going to assume this is also PPR here, given his last question. And honestly, I think all 3 kind of fit in the same tier for me. I would say it depends on your Singletary seems to be like the safest of the options.
Right.
But I think you could make I'd say Singletary and then Sanders and Laird in like the same tier. But I think both are fine to start.
Yeah, Sanders. I mean, I imagine he gets back to that full workload, but there is that in the back of your head that it could be the Boston Scott show. So just keep that in mind.
For sure. Is Tannehill a must start? Somehow in my league, he was left available for pickup, and I grabbed him. So I want to answer this one.
Please do.
Because I don't think at this point at the quarterback position, outside of Lamar Jackson, and maybe, I guess, Deshaun Watson, there's such thing as a must start. So the matchup looks to be solid, 26.5 point implied total for Tennessee. This offense has woken up, but it really depends on your other options, man. I think that if you have someone like a Jameis Winston, or, if you're debating, do I start Tannehill over, let's even you might even be considering him over like a Mahomes or something. That's where we're at in the season, right?
Right. Yeah.
Then I'm not as sure, but I'm not starting him over Dak Prescott.
No.
But, I'd probably start him over Kirk Cousins.
What about this? Because Drake had another question for us, and it kind of ties all this together. So if you have to pick one to start for your fantasy championship this week, Tannehill or Jimmy G, Kyler Murray, or Josh Allen?
Sheesh. Okay, so once again, it really depends on your matchup. If you're looking at it and you feel like steady wins the race, you don't need anything drastic, then I'm okay with Tannehill there, right? Yep. Kind of take his floor. If you feel like you're an underdog, then kind of buy in on the Jimmy G explosion and hope he delivers one of those, 3-4 touchdown games that he has already a couple of times. But that's, once again, so in the playoffs, it's a head-to-head game, and you got to know your opponent. You got to understand. Maybe if you're an underdog, you don't want to play the quarterback that correlates with one of their receivers.
Yep,
so
exactly.
But at a face value, I think if you feel good about it, then you go with Tannehill. If you think you could use a little edge and maybe you're the underdog, I'd go with Jimmy.
I agree. I actually agree with you, Walid. So I think that's the way to go. Tannehill, then Jimmy G. All right, we got one final question. This was a direct message to us, and I thought it was worded fantastically. So I'm going to pose it to you. It's from Joe Fizio, and he says, Mayday, so we know it's important.
Uh-oh.
He needs to stream a free agent quarterback for semifinals this week. Eli, Carr, or Minshew. And he also adds, because this is also important, that his team is full of scrappy junkyard dogs. So he needs a quarterback who's going to step up to the plate.
There you go. So, all right, Derek Carr, I saw him throw the ball away on 4th and goal at the 2-yard line, and I still can't get over it.
He's not a scrappy junkyard dog. You can
No, yeah, he doesn't fit you need dogs, and you're talking about a guy who throw the ball away when he has nothing to lose. So hard to justify, and I don't want to let that blind me because he still could. This is the last game at in Oakland for the Raiders, and the emotions are out. The Jaguars are abysmal against the run, and what that means is the Raiders have they're 6.5-point favorites. They might have opportunities to stretch this game out, but I hate. Oh my god, dude!
There's only one dog in this group, though, right?
There is, but at the same time, like I don't want to miss. What is that like? There's one dog, but I don't want to just pick the dog and then my guy gets dogged by the dog. So, look, I hate to say it. I'll say it right now. Derek Carr is somehow the best option in my eyes, but he's the least dog, so you got to go Gardner Minshew.
Man. You want a player that's going to step up to the plate, lead your pack of dogs. It's got to be Gardner, but Carr may be the safest option.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a dog, and you might have to go Ryan Fitz if he's still there.
Right.
That's the king of the dogs. So, but yeah, I mean, it's either way. I'm not like when you're looking at it from a floor standpoint. I think Derek Carr is just the safest of these guys. He's not going to throw 3 picks because he's just going to throw the ball away if someone's not open, right? So it really comes down to, once again, assessing your situation. Are you a heavy underdog? Is the other team full of scrappy junkyard dogs that need, so it's wide open, man. But I'll take Derek Carr, who's not a dog.
Yeah, a lot of factors to consider here. Definitely a complicated question, to say the least, Joe Fizio.
That's what we're here for. So if you get any other ones, send them our way at Occupy Fantasy. Good luck. I am thrilled. Like Brian said, the hard part is getting here. So feel good about it if you're still playing for something. Don't rest in the past. Don't, make a start or because, someone did right by you a couple weeks ago. Look at this week in a vacuum. And ultimately, you got to be willing to stomach some risk here. No risk it, no biscuit. So best of luck. For Brian, I'm Walid. We'll catch you on the flip side with our DFS podcast.